Alright, so the third and final step of cellular respiration is the ETC, or the electron transport cycle. So what happens here is I already have some of the hydrogen ions placed, but I'm going to explain how they get there. So what happens here is now the NADH comes over, as you know, because it's carrying electrons, and once it reaches this side of the protein, or this side of the matrix near the proteins, it has an oxidation reaction and loses its electron and hydrogen, just becoming NAD. Now, the hydrogens lose their electrons, so now they are hydrogen ions, and the electrons enters into this first protein here. Now the same scenario happens with FADH. Now this has an oxidation reaction, loses its hydrogen ion, loses its electron, the electron goes in here, hydrogen chills down here. So now, this happens once for each NADH and once for each FADH. Now, if you remember, we had 2 FADHs and 2 NADH, or 8 NADH. So that means, you know, there's going to be 8 NAD made and 8 FADs made. But so now, what needs to happen is there's a concentration gradient formed because there's more hydrogens in the intermembrane space than there are in the matrix, and then these hydrogens need to move up. So now, what happens when they need to try to move is these electrons begin bouncing from protein to protein and providing these proteins with enough energy to open up and allow the hydrogen ions to flow through. And they move through all the proteins. And then what happens now is these hydrogen ions, in order to get back down here and form ATP and from ADP, what happens is that this is ATP synthase. So these hydrogens, because of the concentration gradient, they can just move down this ATP synthase, and this is the process of chemiosmosis. They move down this ATP synthase, and as it does that, ADP combines with the phosphate in order to make ATP. Now, when all is said and done, 32 to 34 ATP will be made by the entire ETC, because this just keeps going on in a cycle until cellular respiration is complete. But we have a total of 38 ATP. But this 32 to 34 combines with ATPs made prior. Now, we now have hydrogen electrons and electrons just chilling. So in order to get rid of those, what happens is oxygen comes and picks them up. And because there's 2 hydrogens for each water, each oxygen can pick up 2 hydrogens, making water. So by the end of the ETC, you will have 32 to 34 ATP made by chemiosmosis. You'll have 6 waters, and you're gonna have 8 NAD and 2 FAD.